On today's episode of Locked On Utes, Coach Witt talks to the media and has some high praise for DTR, as well as what does the tape tell us from the Oregon State game? We're talking about it on today's show.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen every single day. We are available on all platforms, including YouTube, where we are at the recording of this podcast 4 subscribers away from 450. So appreciate all of you guys who have made us your home and first listen every day. Today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by Simply Safe Home Security. With fast protect technology exclusive from Simply Safe, 24/7 monitoring agents capture evidence to accurately verify a threat for a faster police response. There's no safe like Simply Safe. Visit simplysafe.com/lockedoncollege to learn more. That's Locked On College, and head over to Simply Safe to find that. But hello, everyone. My name is JT Wistrcill, and excited today to be joined, as he does every week, by the former host of this podcast, Bryan Brown, as well as writer for UteZone.com. And Bryan, we got to hear from Coach Whittingham talking about the game. And look, I mean, he heaped a lot of praise. Whenever you win, he's not a lot of negative things to really criticize. And he got into a little bit about the run game, and we're going to talk about that a little later. But I thought it was interesting how when Coach Witt was kind of asked about, hey, since you've played guys like Anthony Richardson and you've prepared for an Emory Jones, I mean, ASU really, whether that's just Emory Jones wanting to prove like he's trying to say he is a pocket quarterback or just the offense really utilize him as a runner. He's not someone who runs really, but when you're preparing for him, you're still preparing for a running quarterback. So Utah's now prepared for 2 guys who are really capable and successful at running the football. And I think it'll help him versus DTR, who had 2 of the best running highlights you're going to see on the entire season from a quarterback in terms of his hurdle, which was one of the best college football hurdles I've ever seen, and as well as his basically Lamar Jackson-esque play when he stopped on a dime and 2 guys crashed into each other. But this is a DTR that, look, Utah football has beat up a lot in the past, and I think it's going to be a fun challenge for them going to Pasadena once again. And this time DTR playing some really good football, coming off a strong game. And I think it makes sense that Coach Whittingham is talking about him a little bit. Always want to hype guys a little bit up as well, kind of make sure your defense understands the challenge. And I think it's going to be fun for this team to take on DTR as well. And he presents a fun challenge for him.
He does, and I think it's interesting because, I quote tweeted that highlight and said, this is the essence of DTR. And at any point in time, he can be the best player on the field, no matter what field it's on.
That's
and it's
right.
always fascinating to me, the fan responses, right? And the immediate response is like, well, but he doesn't do it every play, blah, blah, blah. And yeah, that's the issue with athletic quarterbacks, with guys who have that elite talent physically, is that they're learning how to control it. Nuance has never had to be a part of their games, right? A player like Bryson Barnes, it's all about the intangibles. It's all about learning how to put touch on a throw, right? It's all about being varied. For an athlete like DTR, it's very rare that he ever walks into a situation where he's not the greatest athlete out there. What's really become evident about him is he started to buy into what Chip Kelly has preached. And I think some of it is a warning. We talk about coaches anytime they're at a podium, they're very rarely talking to fans, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so some of this is a warning to his defense saying, hey, look, you've played Anthony Richardson, you've played Emory Jones. DTR is a cut above, and he's not wrong. I think the other part of it, too, is that DTR has a better running back and a better running game to complement his game as a quarterback with Charbonnet and that UCLA offensive line.
Yeah, Charbonnet had a fantastic game as well. I think it was just some of the shine of that was taken because of how spectacular those DTR highlights were. And you're right, he's a very different runner as well, I'll say, than especially a guy like Anthony Richardson. Richardson, a very strong guy, I think, capable of, once you get hands on him, Richardson is better at breaking those kind of tackles versus DTR is better at not even allowing you to get a hand on him because he is so shifty in the open field. And one thing that's going to be fun as well is to see how this Utah defensive line gets into the backfield and if they are able to track down DTR. And, a lot of people were, I think, a little bit disappointed in the lack of sack production versus Oregon State. But when you look at that offensive line, I mean, that's a really good Beavers offensive line. A lot of people talk about like how many offensive linemen a unit returns. Returning 5 starters is a good thing, but returning 5 starters is also a good thing when they're genuinely really good. A lot of guys, it's like, oh, this guy's back, but it's like, yeah, he wasn't very good last year. That's not the case with Oregon State. They were really good up front, and it's why Utah a lot of the time struggled to get pressure with just 4.
It is, and you can look at the advanced stats from Football Outsiders where they are ranked top 10 across the board in just about everything when it comes to pass protection. Utah's got another tough one with UCLA. As I'm looking at it right now, they're top 5 in average line yards. That's a good indicator of how many yards you can get no matter who the running back is, right? 3.21. So if that line is generating 3.21 yards just right off the bat, that's pretty impressive, right? And so you've seen Utah the last couple of weeks experiment a little bit more with a 5 down line trying to get guys like Mickey Songataranga, guys who can create a matchup issue because they are big and strong, but Mickey's so much quicker than the average guard and he has those long arms. And you saw it at times. He played really well and did a good job. And it did take Utah some time to adjust. I'm going to be honest, some of that was just Mo Diabate coming back in. He is still learning how to play fit football, meaning how to play within a system where you have to be disciplined with your eyes. And you saw him get much better in the second half. So I'm less worried about it in terms of what I saw initially. But Utah does have an absolutely scary, I guess would be one way to put it, proposition, since we're in, spooky season here in October with that UCLA offensive line. Again, top 5 in average line yards, top 5 in stuff rate, meaning they don't get stuffed a whole lot when they're going for it. So if you're watching UCLA and they go for it on 4th down, they convert and people get upset and throw their hands up, like, okay, well, the stats told us that the odds are is that they're going to convert on that. So there are those kinds of things to look for and watch for. But I think the difference is that what Utah is able to do with the front 7 versus now what they have going with Clark Phillips and being able to play both of those positions, both the outside and the nickel corner, that's a much scarier proposition if I'm an offense.
I love that you brought up Diabate as well, because you look at it, 6 of his tackles were 4 excuse me, had 6 tackles, 4 of those were tackled for loss. And that is perfectly what you kind of get out of his game is he's so aggressive. When he sees ball, he's going after ball. Utah has aggressive linebackers in general, but guys like Karene Reed and Lander are a little more patient than Diabate. And sometimes that can be really effective. Hence some of the red zone plays he's able to make where he does see the ball, able to shoot the gap, show off that athleticism and make the tackle in the backfield. But then there's also plays like that reverse on the second drive of the game where he sees a gap, overshoots it so far that he is in no position to get back for the reverse. And if he had been a little more patient, he's athletic enough where he might have had a chance to actually come over and make the stop on that play.
100%. And a lot of it is just eye discipline, right? You're teaching guys to stay steady with your eyes. And listen, I'm the worst when it comes to it. Like anytime I see a piece of brisket or a slice of roasted turkey or whatever it is, like my eyes are drawn to immediately. Big chunk of pie, tough to stay disciplined, right? And you have to look at it from that perspective that you're always fighting against those natural urges when you're out there playing. And so it does take some time for that to become more natural, for that to become more rhythmic. And I think the good thing is that you're seeing that Mo's starting to put his stamp on things and in the ways that he can do it using that athleticism, like you talked about. Now it's about channeling it into the system. I think anytime you've got a guy who's super athletic that maybe kind of fights against what Utah does, now all you have to do is point it at Clark Phillips, right? And just say, not a lot of argument to be had with this guy who was a 4-star cornerback and is now showing out to be one of the best cornerbacks in the country. Not a lot of guys go out and put a three pick game together. And I think that the stunning part about it, not just 3 picks, one was a return for a touchdown, but that last interception was just like
Tremendous.
It's him standing in the arena saying, are you not entertained? Is this not why you are here? So shout out to the California version of the Spaniard in Clark Phillips.
I said this on yesterday's show too, but like when Todd McShay and Mel Kiper are on their NFL draft coverage in the March, April, they're going to say when Clark Phillips comes up, go watch the Oregon State game because he was absolutely dominant. And that's exactly what he does. He just reads quarterbacks and receivers so well, able to undercut so many of those routes. And even that first one, like just the strength, he doesn't look like the strongest guy. He's only 5'9", I believe, and able to jump up top, rip the ball away from receivers. And as you mentioned, that last one, just the ability to adjust the ball in air is so fantastic.
Yeah, I mean he is kind of like a muscle hamster in an essence, right? Like he doesn't have the length or the size or the imposing frame like a Zemiah Vaughn for one example, but he is packed muscle onto every single space on his body, and it can be deceptive when he's out there because he doesn't like you say, overwhelm you, like say maybe a Mo Diabate does, with his frame.
Yes.
But it's the essence of Clark Phillips. He maximizes every single ounce of his game and ounce of his ability, and he's done it ever since he walked on campus. I'll never forget the very first spring that I was up there watching him, and every single rep was against one of the best wide receivers on the team. And I think, it's one of those things where we watch the game and it looks so different from what we expected it to be. But really, that's what you want, is you want those different looks when teams come at you in different manners and try to stop your strengths. You want to be able to bounce and pivot and win in differentiating ways. And Utah didn't just win, like they blew it out.
They
Like,
did.
this is a team
They
that, what
rolled.
was it, 17-14, the week before against USC for Oregon State. And it's not like
Yeah.
they came in and just quit. Like, this was a team that kept going and kept fighting and stayed in the fight even after Chance Nolan went out with an injury. And
Yeah. Still
you,
moved the ball.
yeah, and Utah was great. It just didn't look like Utah normally does, because finally we saw this defense be a lot more opportunistic with the turnovers.
And I think we saw Utah get behind a couple times on first down where they're only going for 1 yard, and we're going to talk about why that is in just a second. But first, want to tell you guys a little bit more about Simply Safe. So, Simply Safe, guys, the numbers don't lie. In the last decade, over 4 million people have chosen Simply Safe home security to protect their homes. You don't earn the trust of that many people without doing something right. At Simply Safe, your safety is the only thing that matters. And when you guys get Simply Safe, you are protected with cutting edge security technology powered by 24/7 professional monitoring agents who always have your back. Here's why I love Simply Safe. They have 24/7 professional monitoring. Simply Safe's agents call you the moment a threat is detected and dispatch the police or first responders in an emergency, even if you're not home or can't be reached. Simply Safe blankets your home in protection with advanced sensors in every room, window, and door. HD security cameras for inside and outside your home, smarter ways to detect motion that only alert you when a threat is real, and even hazard sensors that instantly detect fires, floods, and other threats to your home. Simply Safe always has your guys' back in case any emergency pops up. Simply Safe is a great resource to have for you guys and can help you feel safe at your home. Customize the perfect system for your home in just a few minutes at simplysafe.com. Use the /locked-on-college. So that's simplysafe.com/locked-on-college. Save 20% on your Simply Safe security system when you sign up for an interactive monitoring plan and get your first month free. Visit simplysafe.com/locked-on-college. The L in locked on, the O in on, and the C in college are all capitalized in that. And once again, one word, locked on college. Learn more. There's no safe like Simply Safe. One thing that was not really safe this week against Oregon State were Utah running backs. They were met very quickly at the line. And it's the reason why, when coming out of this game, if you had actually told me that Utah's leading rushers would be Cam Rising and Jalen Dixon, I would have been, or even I'll say, if Cam leads you in rushing, it's not the end of the world. But like Jalen Dixon being second on the team with only 1 carry, I would have been like, oh, Utah might have lost that game then. But they were able to win because of games by Devon as well as Cam was sensational. But when talking about the ground game with the running backs, you get Mekhi Bernard had 6 for 19, Glover had 6 for 18, and Thomas had 6 for 13. And talking about why that is, Coach Whittingham talked about it in struggles reaching the second level. And that's what I saw a lot of on tape as well. I think you're seeing whether it is guys like Paul Miley, really the interior of this offensive line, because those are the guys you're really asking to get to that second level on those zone plays a lot of the time. So it is guys like Keaton Bills, Michael Mokafisi, who they're trying to reach second level. And it's credit to Oregon State's linebackers as well. Those are very good linebackers too, who are able to get past, but still opportunities for the Utes to make plays. And whether it's them not staying with blocks long enough or just having trouble getting their hands on and reaching those guys, they're just struggling to do it right now a little bit.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that we haven't seen a ton of struggle maybe up until this point. I think there's two things that you need to credit. One is that linebacking core from Oregon State, and Coach Whittingham even mentioned it finally in the press conference. And I will give him credit because he started into his post game interview with Bill Riley and was kind of getting into it a little bit, and then he stopped himself and said, "I'm always going to be nitpicky. That's a really good defensive front from Oregon State." And there's no lies detected in that one. I think Omar Spates is a star, and he was great. And I think some of that is, I think there's a play in the first quarter that stands out to me, right? And one, it's Nolan is about to scramble, and Karene Reed reads it, and he goes up against the blocker, and he has to pick a side,
The running back. Yep.
right?
I know exactly what
hmm
you're talking about.
Yeah, and Nolan goes the opposite side because he reads his block, and that's the benefit of having that shield or that ability, as a linebacker, is you can pick the hole when you're having to choose between two holes. Sometimes that forced indecision, right? That's a really great place to be in if you're an offense. And Utah wasn't able to do that, and I think some of the credit goes to that Oregon State defensive line. Some of it is just, guys are learning still. Michael Mokafisi starting in his sixth game of the year. I guess starting, yeah. He's played in a half
Played, yes.
against Colorado last year, and that was about it. Yeah, and Paul Miley, same thing. Like, he hasn't even started a full season yet. So
The
these are
towel out at
guys.
tackle.
Yeah, and I still don't really love that move, to be honest with you, JT. Satawa, like, I get what you're trying to do in terms of, your five best really are Keaton Bills, Paul Miley, Michael Mokafisi, Satawa, and Braden. But, I've seen some things from that second unit that, like, I have to wonder, like, if Falcon Kamatule isn't maybe pushing some of that a little bit in terms of trying to mix things up. But you don't want to rotate your offensive linemen, especially for a group that's still. This is a hard one because Utah fans don't ever want to hear the truth. Like, this is a group that's still gelling, and it's always going to be like that. That's
Yep.
part of offensive line play, and that's the hard part about it. We talked about Oregon State returning all five starters, and all five starters are good. And those interior three, like those three guys, are going to be day one, day two, day three draft picks in the NFL when they all come out. And so we'll watch next year, and Oregon State's going to be in big trouble because they're going to be missing some really great offensive linemen. But the good news is that you get this game against Oregon State that gives you a lot more to work on this week as you go against UCLA.
And you make such a good point when we talk about the unit gelling as well. It's not like Keaton Bills is making all these mistakes. It's not like Michael Mokafisi is. It's not like Paul Miley is. It's not like Satawa is. It's individual moments where four of the guys are doing their job, and then one guy isn't able to get his block down. And that's the thing. And that's where if you do swap a guy out, like you said, maybe it does make you better in the long run. I mean, we saw how good Bam Olaseni did a good job stepping up last year, but obviously injuries ended up forcing that move for the Utes in the end. Like, it is just a difficult thing to handle. It's going to be interesting to see how this team does decide to play it as well, because the continuity amongst an offensive line is so important. And I'll even mention one other thing about just this Oregon State team. We were told a lot, especially by just people and some of the media stuff. It really seemed like the weakness of this Oregon State team was in the front seven, because it seemed like they were really good on the back seven. And I don't know if it was just the way they played, but like you said, man, those linebackers, I mean, Coach Wood even said, those are all Pac-12 guys. The defensive linemen did a really good job for the Beavers as well. This is a really good Beavers team, I think. And the secondary is really good too. Give credit to Devon Vele for making a number of plays on the outside. And, Jalen Dixon won his big first rep to the outside to get a touchdown as well. So it really does feel like it was in a lot of instances, just how good this Oregon State team is, more so than, oh, Utah is poor in this area.
Yeah, and I think a lot of what the media was selling you in terms of this front seven isn't good was without depth, right? It's not the problem that they're not good; they're just not consistent, And there are guys on that front seven that play great and have great plays, and then the very next time they let something big happen, and you saw them be a little bit more consistent. But yeah, they limited Utah to rushing the way that Utah normally rushes the football. I don't know about you, JT, but 42 points allowed is a big problem
Yes.
if I'm a team. And we can argue about the fact that Utah had to get it off of turnovers, but had to, right? But the bottom line is that offense was still clicking for Utah for the most part, and Oregon's defense never stopped. Utah was perfect in the red zone. Kyle Whittingham made sure to make a point of that at the very opening of his press conference, and that's
Which is
been
what
an
this team struggled
issue.
against Arizona State.
Yeah. So it's just like some of this, I get the need to overreact and be nitpicky, right? Because this is a fan base that has listened and hung on every single word that Kyle Whittingham said for 18 years now, however long he's been in charge. I keep losing track of that stat because it's been so long, majority of my adult life. But the bottom line is that, Utah is improving in various areas, and teams are going to try and take things away more and more to try and make them one dimensional. And the beauty of it is Utah's finding ways to win on the fly. And I think sometimes we don't give them enough credit for that. Like, it's really hard to go into a game, have a team try to take away your game plan, and then you just flip the script. But I think even the Cam Rising touchdown run there in the second quarter is a great example of what's going on. Like, they ran that exact same play in the first quarter, and Cam gave up the middle. Second time he pulls, he's around the corner out the outside and into the end zone for a score. So it doesn't look like we wanted it to look.
Yeah.
And that's where the emotional reaction's coming from. But you look at the statistics and Utah was pretty good.
Mhm. No, they were a number of those numbers very encouraging for the Utes you talked about as well. It is funny, I
Yeah.
think just in some of the numbers as well do hurt the Utes in terms of look, they were outgained. They had or OSU had more rushing and passing yards and of course total yards as well. But what matters most is being effective inside the red zone on those critical downs in those big time situations. And you mentioned the improvements from Cam on the first opportunity he had to run in the game. He should have pitched it to the outside from Mekhi Bernard. That would have been an easy first down if he would have pitched it. Instead, he tried to tuck it to the inside and run. But then you just saw later on in the games he was making the correct read in on that touchdown run. He could have been like, well, I didn't give it last time, and that was the wrong read. And he was like, no, I see this is the right read. Takes it to the outside, makes a phenomenal play, breaking 2 tackles for his best run of the season. Honestly, I think so far, just based on what he did on the outside. And you mentioned the red zone offense, how effective it was. Utah's red zone defense also outstanding. And we're going to dive into some of the numbers that they put up in just a second. But first, I want to tell you guys about Built Bar Puffs. If you haven't tried Built Bar Puffs yet, you are depriving yourself of one of life's greatest joys. And guess what? There's a new flavor, ready, delicious, indulgent cookie dough covered in chocolate. That's right. Built has done it again. Let me introduce you to your new favorite cookie dough chunk puffs. They have a light and chewy texture, real cookie dough chunks. And of course, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. All the joys of eating cookie dough without the hassle of making it. Plus, it's healthy for you. Cookie dough chunk puffs are only 160 calories, and they have a whopping 15 grams of protein, 15 grams of protein. So like all Built bars, the chocolate cookie dough chunk puffs is got a great flavor. It's healthy for you as well. So you guys are going to love it whether you need a snack for a workout, a late night treat, or just need to grab a quick bite. Built is the perfect protein bar, and they taste better than a candy bar. Ditch the calories, fat, and sugar. Grab yourself a Built bar. Go to built.com, use promo code locked on 15. That's all caps, locked on 15, and get 15% off your order. So use promo code locked on 15. Make sure you guys head over and get some great stuff from Built Bar. Speaking of great stuff, Utah's red zone defense, absolutely outstanding. OSU was 0 for 5 in the red zone against the Utes in this one in terms of scoring touchdowns. Yes, they had to settle and kick some field goals because they got it down there. But at the end of the day, this is the definition of a bend, don't break game. Utah did such a great job, whether it was guys like I saw Junior Tafuna on some of those drives. He would get pushed back a little bit and can't break off. And then it comes in the red zone, boom, throwing the guys out of the way, making a plays. Aliki Vaimahi was the guy who didn't have a tackle versus Arizona State that I wanted to make sure to highlight because he's playing really good football this year. Makes a huge tackle in the red zone. You brought up Zamiah Vaughn. He made the touchdown saving tackle to get that got, yes, OSU was in the red zone, but made the tackle. And then the very next play, pass breakup in the end zone. RJ Hubert's interception. Just this defense, especially as well as because the very first game, obviously the criticism was the run defense. And look, they got gashed a little bit in the run, but at the end of the day, the goal of football is to get in the end zone and score points. And the Utah defense did not allow the Beavers to do that.
They didn't, and look, it was and I'm going to call it an outstanding defensive effort. And I like you highlighted something that I think was very, very important. There was one play where Smote Peppa got pancaked, right?
Yeah.
And listen, number one, that's a big pancake, right?
Yes.
Because that's a lot of man. But then you watched him bounce back. And what I loved about it is yeah, you got knocked over one play. The very next play, you step up and you make a tackle. And then a few plays later, you go chase down a running back and fall on top of him and end up being, the real stack. If you saw me earlier on the film and my eyes went wide, it's because my mic was falling. It's not because I disagreed with JT at all in terms of what this defense did. But we've talked about it, and you and I especially have talked about this is not going to be a suffocating, never cross the 50, never get any yards kind of defense. This is going to be the defense where they're opportunistic and they're going to take chances and they're going to try and make plays. I think the lack of pressure was surprising, but that's really what Oregon State is designed to do is allow those quarterbacks to sit back there and make plays. And so I think Utah really played to their strength. I think seeing more Zamiah Vaughn was a good thing. I think, I'm not trying to criticize guys, but you can see the impact of having Clark Phillips sliding in there into the nickel position when Utah needs it has been really positive. And again, we talk about, I think Kyle Whittingham mentioned it as well. Like when you have athletes like Connor O'Toole and Jonah Ellis and even Van Fillinger who can drop into coverage and who can create that, that
Well, Van Schmatt
disguise.
versus Florida. He dropped
Yeah.
it. Anthony Richardson threw him right to him.
Yeah, and so I think, there's a lot of
Yeah, when you got a guy in position to make plays, it's just something that is so valuable.
and you've got a lot of things that you can do with this defense, right? And you've got a lot of guys and a lot of personnel that you're trying to get in there and trying to get rotations, and you're seeing guys really start to shine in different roles. And I think the biggest thing is like RJ Hubert, from where he was at against Florida to where he's at now, massive disparity, and that's what you love to see.
Yeah, when looking at Hubert as well, led this team in tackles, as you mentioned, 12 tackles, 9 of those solo. Of course, the huge interception as well. That felt like it was just one of those many instances late where you're really starting to put a team away when you make plays like that as well. And it was also great to see Utah be so effective on offense of taking those turnovers and turning them into points. Because how often throughout the game a lot of games, are you like, oh, the defense got a turnover, but then the offense couldn't capitalize it? Just in general of football, that's just something that happens with a lot of teams. And that was not something that Utah dealt with as well. So it was a fantastic win, as you highlighted, Bryan, and just a great momentum booster to, as we've been talking about for weeks now on this podcast, just you keep building up levels and levels. And you're at the next one now with this UCLA team. Got a huge win versus Washington. We talked about the challenge that DTR presents, but what do you think about this game, Bryan?
And what the line's at 3 right now,
I believe, yes.
and that's just kind of like a home team standard. And I think it's for good reason. Like, UCLA is a good football team, and I know people love to knock on Chip Kelly. Some of it is well deserved because Chip's just kind of arrogant, like,
Yes.
and he hit some bumpy roads going into the NFL, but that doesn't mean that he still can't coach, right? And Chip's one of my favorite guys because
Here's where
sometimes
you're
he
going
can
to, yeah.
hit the nail on the head
Yeah.
so well. I'll never forget. I believe it was one of the LA Times reporters, I think it was Ben Bolsch or something like that, asked him about, everything with going to the Big Ten and all that stuff. And Chip responded, he's like, I'm just trying to have a good Tuesday.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that I do love about Chip is he always keeps things in perspective in terms of what matters most to him. And, I think you're starting to see that really seep into the culture with UCLA and their program. And this is going to be, I hate the term, uh, so a Top Gun style dogfight, right? Where you're going to see a lot of high powered,
Mhm.
high caliber, expensive equipment going at each other, right? Like these are two programs that have really um, built themselves into something strong and developed and everything like that. And I think there's some unique matchups, in terms of like Utah claims that they have the best TEs in the country. UCLA claims they have some of the best tight ends in the country. You've got two very elite quarterbacks, but for different reasons. I think
Mhm.
Cam Rising's a little bit more of an intangibles guy, whereas DTR, we talked about the physical
Very different
abilities.
runners of the football as well.
Yeah, and Zach Charbonnet is an elite running back. I think he's the best in the conference. I know Utah fans
Mm.
love Tavion Thomas, and I think this is a great weekend for Tavion to really take things by the horns, get your stuff done, take care of your business. Don't be so quick to shun accountability for that kind of stuff and go out and set the tone. Prove
Mhm.
yourself in a game that both for your future at Utah and for your future as a player in the NFL someday means a lot. Because if you're going up,
Does.
head to head against Charbonnet, you need to prove yourself. And so this is very much a prove it game, I think, for Utah in a lot of ways, especially as you're going into a big matchup back at home in a week against USC, and then 2 weeks down the road against Washington State.
And it's been a slow couple weeks for Tavion as well. So I think with that offensive line getting going more, it sounds like Coach Witt accepts him to get more carries this week as he's going to be shaping up for a bigger role as well. So it's going to be fun to see if he and this Utah offense are able to stand a test, because look, Utah's had UCLA's number in the past, but in this UCLA team, they know that. And I think they're really fired up and ready to go. And this is going to be a fantastic matchup that we are just starting to break down on Locked On Utes. So Bryan, appreciate you always as joining us. Anything else you wanted to add?
Just that I love working with you and hanging out with you here on the pod. So thanks for
I
having me
love it
every
as well,
single
brother.
week. And if people aren't subscribing at the YouTube channel, I just have to wonder, like, it's trick or treat season. That like go go hand out a treat, subscribe on the YouTube channel, or make me do a trick, and we'll get it either way.
Yeah, I would appreciate it as well. And speaking of treats as well, if you guys aren't following at Brown Bear at SLC, what are you doing? Missing some fantastic breakdowns of Utah football, whether it's on the film as well as some great Twitter content as well. So make sure you guys keep it tuned to Bryan's feed for all of his great content he has coming up, as well as keep it here on Locked On Utes. But if you are in the market for a second listen every day, the Locked On Pac-12 podcast hosted by Spencer McLaughlin is the place for you. He does a great job with all of the analysts that we have on the Locked On network, breaking down the conference, fun game recaps from the past weekend, as well as previewing some fun upcoming matches for this weekend, including one great one, obviously, Utah versus UCLA, which we are going to be hitting on all week long. So make sure you guys keep it here on Locked On Utes, but that's going to do it for today's episode. So we'll see you tomorrow.